Now, if the last decade of India could be described as incredible India, and the man who coined that term is right here with us, the next decade is being bettered upon as the Make in India decade. Everywhere you go, every industrialist, every investor you talk to is talking about the magic of India, the dream of making in India. Now, since liberalization, if one would look at India's growth trajectory, we focused on services instead of manufacturing. We completely skipped the manufacturing cycle and we straight away jumped on to the services cycle, which is very different from how other countries have gone about developing and building industries, creating jobs, so on and so forth. So in a way, government's focus on encouraging manufacturing in India, on its thrust to manufacturing, is going back a little bit. We are doing something that we should have done maybe 10 years ago. So is Make in India just a clever tagline, and it is very clever, or is it going to be a real game changer? Is the gear lion ready to roar? That's what we're going to talk about right now. And let me introduce my very eminent panel. I have two industrialists here who have been at the forefront of writing India's economic growth story. Mr. Y.C. Deveshwar, he's been he is the 7th best performing CEO in the world according to the Harvard Business Review. He's expanded ITC much beyond tobacco to FMCG, hotels, hospitality, you name it. We have Mr. Baba Kalyani of the Kalyani Group. It's a $2 billion group, and Mr. Kalyani has been a very vociferous supporter of the Make in India campaign, and in fact, they were exchanging notes on the work that Mr. Kalyani wants to do in the defense sector just a little while ago. I'm a reporter. I cannot help overhearing conversations. We have Valerie here, Valerie Wagner. She is, likes to describe herself as the first foreign lady tech CEO in India. She moved to India, created this phenomenal company called ZipDial based on missed calls. And it's a 500 crore rupee industry, sold it off to Twitter. So clearly, I was talking to her and she was talking about how the idea of innovating in India and the room to innovate in India is what excites her. Thanks, Valerie. And we have, of course, the man who is going to Make in India happen. And he's Mr. Amitabh Kant. Clearly, a lot of expectations riding on Mr. Kant. He has delivered some brilliant campaigns in the past, and that's why the government has entrusted him with their most important campaign, which is going to be a make or break campaign for this government. Let me begin with Mr. Deveshwar. Mr. Deveshwar, what excites you about Make in India? Since ITC is a homegrown company, we've seen the company expand so much. What is it that gets you hooked on to Make in India?
All my career, I was sort of grown up in independent India, got educated here. Of course, I did go abroad and get educated in some of the famous institutions of the world. But I regard myself as a patriotic Indian who's always aspired to see India rise. And all these years, you know, that aspiration has not been fulfilled, even though one has reached the evening of one's professional career. And with this Make in India, it's a very simple statement, but it embodies a very bold and far-reaching vision, but very simply communicated. Because any strategy, if it has to get fulfilled, it must be comprehended by all participants. And in a country such as India, as diverse as India, and with the kind of problems that India has,
right.
The biggest problem of India is that it's a very young country. But there are 12 million people coming into the job market every year. And in the next, by 2025, 30 million more people will come into the job market.
Absolutely.
If we don't provide them jobs, quality jobs that has dignity in those jobs, then we are sitting on the brink of a disaster.
A potential
that is going to
demographic
potential
disaster.
demographic disaster.
Let me get in Mr. Kalyani. Mr. Kalyani, you're focusing a lot on defense. And you've like I said, that you've really been a very vociferous supporter of Make in India. What will it take for Mr. Kant to really deliver on to make in India truly happen? Because it's a brilliant campaign, but has anything really changed on ground?
You know, answering your question on defense, I think I need to go back a little bit in terms of what my friend Yogi just talked about. You know, till the year 2000, most of us in the manufacturing sector in India or in business in India simply just didn't believe in ourselves that we can really make it happen. Past 2000, most of us who have tried to take our sectors that we operate in the global marketplace have found some immense amount of success and immense amount of confidence. In my own business, I'm #1 in the world today, supplying to every continent of this globe. Now, that's fundamentally what's driving me to say that, you know, if the defense sector is opening up, India and Indian industry and many of us have the capability to make a lot of these things. Now, clearly there are a lot of issues. A lot of issues are being solved. For example, if you just take the building blocks of making this happen, first is the regulatory processes, which have fairly been resolved, whether it's licensing, whether it's what you can make, whether it's the 49% FDI.
That's really helped? The 49% FDI has helped?
Tremendously. I mean, there is a queue of people who are wanting to form joint ventures to take the opportunity of producing and supplying products in India for the defense sector at this rate. So I think, you know, a lot of things are happening. There are still a few things to happen. If you take manufacturing in India, and what is it going to take for Make in India to happen, or what I would like, you know, Mr. Amitabh Kant to really do, you know, manufacturing has 4 basic customer segments. You have the B2B segment, which is, I think, rolling along pretty well. It depends largely on macroeconomic conditions. You have the B2C business, which Mr. Deveshwar is involved in. I think that's rolling along pretty well. But when you come to B2G, dealing with government monopolies, defense being, you know, one such entity, there's a lot of things that need to be done.
Okay, so let's hold that thought. Let me get in Valerie here. Valerie, you moved to India about 7 years ago. You built a business here. You sold it off. How difficult or how easy is it to be a startup entrepreneur in India? And considering you've been in the United States, you've lived a major part of your life there, could you draw a comparison for us on how far behind or how far ahead is India?
As an entrepreneur, the biggest problems you have to solve are finding product market fit, hiring talent, finding your first customer, scaling your customer base. I think that it's a red herring to talk about starting, in particular in software, manufacturing and whatnot are very, very different, of course, which I have no expertise to comment on. But in software, it's the last problem on way down on the list of many other problems that are about building your team, building your product, finding your customers. So I don't think it's actually something as an entrepreneur or as a community of entrepreneurs that we even think about as being a problem. There are plenty of investors from other markets interested in India, interested in not only the big consumer market and companies building for the consumer market, but also in the immense kind of talent and innovation that comes out of India. There's much more demand than there is action because there's hesitancy about not knowing how to invest or being uncertain or at the end of the day thinking, oh, it's just easier to invest in my home country. So I have seen that dynamic, and anything that any government can do to help that will certainly help. But as an entrepreneur, I don't worry about those things because I have 100 other problems to solve.
Okay. All right. Let me come to Mr. Kant here. Mr. Kant, we put you on the hot seat. Because clearly, as in, expectations have been very high. And part of it, I think the government is to be blamed because the government has really gone all out in promoting Make in India. Tell us, even as we speak today, we know that a 20,000 crore odd rupee tax notice has been slapped on Cairn. Retrospective tax continues to be an issue. Policy uncertainty, yes, you're making all the right noises, but it still continues to haunt investors. It continues to hold them back from coming here and setting up or investing. What are you going to do about it?
Well, Sweta, first of all, it's important that this country grows at rapid rates. And I think it's important that government makes this country a very easy place to do business. So last 7 to 8 months, we've scrapped a number of processes, paperwork, acts, rules. That's one bit of it. Number two, we've integrated and converged several departments on an eBiz platform where you can have one paper, one single point of payment, just make it easy. We've challenged the states. We've given them 98 points to crack by May. June, July, we'll evaluate the states on that basis, and we've pushed this limit hard. We've opened up the FDI regime across sectors, defense, construction, railways, which was unheard of, insurance, medical devices, one after another. India is today one of the most open economies of the world as far as FDI is concerned. Last 9 months, the FDI has grown at about 36 to 37%. There are challenges. These are some legacies of the past. Issues of taxation. India needs consistency and predictability of policy. India needs a very stable policy on land acquisition. And these issues, you can blame this government for everything, but you can't blame it at all for timidity. It has taken some very bold measures. It's opened up not merely FDI, it's adopted the ordinance route. And as far as economic decisions are concerned, I think it's taken all the right decisions. You need to just sustain this over a long period of time.
Sure, but the government did have an opportunity to roll back the retrospective tax amendment. We've had 2 budgets now. Yeah. Yet, the government has taken no action, and now we have 35 odd cases that might actually come up, and companies might be asked. And so clearly there's a problem here which could have been addressed in a more headlong manner, but you didn't do that.
No, I think the government has sent out all the right messages as far as consistency, predictability, and clarity of tax policies is concerned. It's not appealed against the Vodafone case, which very few governments would have done. It's issued a circular for non-adversarial tax regime, and I find the tax department far more friendlier than what it ever was in the past in India's history.
Mr. Deveshwar, does Mr. Khan's explanation convince you? Considering we know that retrospective tax is a legacy issue. It's a huge overhang on investors. Until the time there is real clarity and certainty on that, we are not going to see much action coming in.
Well, Shweta, there has to be a 360 degrees action on making India competitive, internationally competitive. Not only competitive, but responsibly competitive, because there is a new dimension of environmental friendliness in what you do. Now, taxation is one aspect. The other aspect is a lot of Indian capital has gone out to China to service the Indian market.
Yeah.
People have gone out to Indonesia. So, in a sense, the interest of Indian capital in many instances and the national interests are divergent. So we are in such dire straits that with a single-minded purpose, and I agree with Mr. Kant, that we need to first get our own land fertile for competitiveness and extreme competitiveness. Even after you become very competitive, people are not going to dismantle their supply chains overseas or value chains overseas and switch, because a small difference of 2 to 5% is not going to motivate people to dismantle those value chains and then come to India. So it's a Herculean task. What we did, we got carried away when we were running at 9%. We got carried away and we opened up on the trade account significantly without reforming our economy for competitiveness. And what Mr. Kant can do is really, ease of doing business more at the central level. But much of it is at the state level, and not even at the state level, at the local self-government level.
So this fiscal federalism.
Let me just finish this, because I'm a practitioner.
Of course.
We're trying to build Indian brands because, one is make in India. You can make a 200 rupees shirt in Ludhiana, but when it goes abroad and sells for 30,000 bucks because somebody's brand on it, because intellectual property, gets associated with that 200 bucks, it multiplies many times. So if you want India to be from a developing country to a developed nation, we need to build also intellectual property. So Make in India is not only manufacture in India. You also create ideas in India, and you also create intellectual property in India, research and development. So it is a long road ahead. Now, local self-government, we are wanting to build 20 factories all around India so that they can service local markets more efficiently than international brands can. And it takes us 2 years to resolve the issue of a tree being cut, because corruption has seeped down to such a level. And it is at the local self-government level. It is at a municipality level. So if we go by what our Prime Minister has said, na khayenge, na khane denge, right? Then you can wait until reform has to be done so seriously. And we've begun on the land issue. You can see that there are obstacles because there is competitiveness on the political front.
Right. What are we going to do about land acquisition, Mr. Kant? It's a huge issue, and clearly it seems like the government is having a tough time breaking ice on that.
Well, the 2013 bill was extremely complex. It was so complicated. It's just full of committees, subcommittees, groups, subgroups. It'll take you a decade to get a piece of land. India wants to do drainage, sewage, solid waste. India needs to accommodate 700 million people who are going to get into the process of urbanization. You need to create new cities. Otherwise, every single city will become a slum. India must use the eminent domain of the state to build its world-class infrastructure. Every single country of the world has done it. You can't create complications through land acquisition bills which are unworkable on ground.
So is there a thinking in the government that the government, since it's already fighting a stereotype that it's considered very pro-corporate, that it might just give up on the contentious clauses? Or it might become a little more lenient on the contentious clauses of rehabilitation and the consensus clause?
No, I think the revised one, which is presently on, is a practical win-win situation. And I think we need to go through. For country's sake, you need to build up a political consensus on a number of issues of land, issues of labor. And I think we need to take the country forward more than anything else. And I think this present modified bill which has come in is a pretty good bill.
Mr. Kalyani, your thoughts on the land acquisition bill?
No, I totally agree with Amitabh. I think somewhere we are beginning to lose what is paramount interest for the nation. I attended the previous 2 sessions here. The first, the ambassador session, where the German ambassador talked about India being at the high table in the next month in Hanover, and hoping that, from whatever he has heard, a lot of things are likely to happen out there. And then Ms. Mehbooba Mufti talking about Prime Minister Modi has the mandate of this nation to make changes. Now, clearly, if you have a mandate to make changes, people expect change to happen. And if you bring in bills like land acquisition bills and things like that, which can take 5 to 10 years to acquire a piece of land with 20, agencies who can stop it from ever happening, I think we are simply just not going to make progress.
Right. Mr. Deveshwar, you want to make a point?
See, one has to think out of the box. For instance, I'm in no position to do things, but if I were in the position to do some things, I would have said if the last bill had said 4 times the market price, I would go and say I would give you 6 times the market price to the farmers, but I will allow the land cost for new factories to be depreciated like plant and machinery. Instead of giving 25% over 4 years, tax to be brought down from 30 to 25, I would link that reduction with land being now. You can say nowhere in the world land depreciates, but you could always compensate and link the reduction in corporate tax with the excessive cost of land, and the farmers would be with you if they're getting twice the amount of.
Do you think one
price.
of the big failings has been the communication issue? Because this is not a bad deal for the farmers, but I think somewhere along the line the government has not been able to communicate the true essence of what is it that they're trying to do, whether it's Make in India, whether it's land acquisition. Somewhere a lot of the essence of what they're trying to accomplish gets lost in translation.
On the land side, let me tell you, there's some very innovative things which are happening. In the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, we went through a very big process of town planning in Gujarat, which is extremely innovative. We are doing a city which is bigger than Singapore there. And it's a unique, every farmer is on board. In Maharashtra, we've taken about, close to Aurangabad, we've taken 60 square kilometers of land, where Maharashtra state is just on plain negotiations with the farmer. So there are very unique things happening. But I think if the country needs to grow at 9 to 10%, if manufacturing needs to grow at 14 to 15%, you need to make things easy. You don't need to make things complicated and difficult. And that's what's important. And politicians across the board must realize this, that the paramount importance is the country to grow and create jobs.
Absolutely. Let's go back. Let's go back in the last decade. We've seen companies like Flipkart, Snapdeal, whatever innovation we've seen it in the technology space. And they're really not new ideas, but of course they've been implemented and executed very well in India. So Valerie, I'd like you to come in here. Is it easier, or as an entrepreneur, how do you look at a brick and mortar business versus a technology-driven business? What works for a tech business? Why is it so cool to be a technology entrepreneur and not a brick and mortar entrepreneur?
Part of
what's working for India?
One thing that's interesting about India as a market and other markets like this is that any technology, any e-commerce, for example, you mentioned Flipkart and Snapdeal, it's impossible to build that business purely as an internet-only company. You have to think about logistics. You have to think about last-mile delivery. You have to think about warehousing. You have to think about all these things. And even as ZipDial and now Twitter as a mobile and kind of content-driven business, we think all the time about the fact that people are offline and how are they interacting with other types of content offline, be it television, print, et cetera. So there's this constant offline-online bridge. When it comes to, and hopefully this boom in things like e-commerce and whatnot will actually have an ancillary impact on other brick-and-mortar businesses. So as e-commerce grows, there's a lot more demand for logistics and innovation in logistics and betting big on those types of businesses. So I think that there's a spillover effect or a very, very direct linkage between success of kind of pure technology internet and even more opportunities for innovation and growth within brick and mortar.
Okay. I was speaking to a businessman from Ludhiana, and he likes to count potholes. So he told me that there are about 163 potholes, 168 between Delhi and Ludhiana, and 62 between a 4-kilometer stretch of his two factories. So, so that's the challenge that we are looking at. And then he even related, he narrated an anecdote to me that he interviewed this young gentleman who had an engineering degree. And he asked him, what's the difference between an inch and a centimeter? And he said, they're not related. And this is somebody who had an engineering degree. So we are talking about a huge skilling challenge. We are talking about a huge infrastructure challenge here. Mr. Kant, we are talking about cooperative federalism, where states are coming forward and taking equal responsibility. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that you set these deadlines for states, and states have to deliver. How are you going to monitor, and how are you going to make sure that the states buy into your vision? Because a lot is dependent on, to make in India a success, a lot depends on how states work with the center, or work with the businesses that are going to come in and set up businesses there and invest.
So, much of the action is in states, and I think you need to build up a very strong competitive spirit. Create a sense of competition among states, not just Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, etc., but almost all the states. And that's what we are trying to do by putting these 98 points, saying that achieve them. We'll evaluate you at the end of May, and we'll say which are the best performing states and which are the best worst performing states. Just name and shame, to my mind. But while you were talking about potholes, let me tell you, there's a huge imbalance in demand and supply of infrastructure, but there's some very exciting things also happening in the country. If you were to just look at Bangalore and I'm saying this in the context of inches and centimeters, which you talked about. If you were to just look at Bangalore and Hyderabad today, there are 800 multinational corporations who shifted their research and development completely to India, to Bangalore. They're employing something like 450,000 Indians. So there's another very vibrant India in terms of innovation, in terms of R&D. Multinational corporations across the world have stopped doing R&D in their companies. They started doing it in Bangalore and Hyderabad. And much of this story is an invisible story which is not told by commentators like you.
No, I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. We even did an entire cover story on Make in India and why it should be a success. But the fact remains that, so this Ludhiana businessman is also a reality that you cannot wish away. So power is a huge issue. And again, all of it comes down to land acquisition, clarity of policy, and creating an ecosystem. That's what's really missing. So in your view, in the next 10 years, what do you hope to see what do you hope to see in India that would have completely transformed the manufacturing landscape?
Well, there's several challenges. If India needs to grow at 9 to 10%, manufacturing must grow at 14 to 15%. Exports, manufactured exports and engineered exports must grow at 20 to 22%. And this requires a range of things. It requires flexibility in labor laws, to my mind. That's a key. 84% of India's employment is coming through MSME. And out of 84%, 69% is in micro-enterprises. India is ensuring that its micro-enterprises are not able to grow big. India needs size and scale. You need to take on the world if you want to be a global player. Make in India is not about protectionism. It's about being a global player. We are in a globalized world. And if you want to be a global player, if you want to be a part of the global value chain, you must think in terms of size and scale. And for that, you need labor flexibility, you need land flexibility, you need right energy supplies at the right price points, and make India a highly cost-competitive nation.
Absolutely. So making it cost-competitive, let me get in Mr. Deveshwar here. Mr. Deveshwar, all sounds very good, very encouraging. But how far are we, or how distant is this reality at the moment? Because cost competitiveness, you speak to any MSME, and he will tell you about the battle he has to fight, not only with China, with Bangladesh, with Indonesia. Every country is formidable competition for India right now in terms of cost advantages. India has lost out on its cost advantages. It pays heavily because of its lack of infrastructure. So how distant is this reality right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is very distant, but we need not lose heart. Now, I'll give you further examples. 85% of Vietnam's production of agarbattis is exported to India. And this is CSR work that we do where women roll agarbatti and get some livelihood. But we are not competitive in agarbatti.
Right.
So, stationery is reserved for the small scale, but Japanese stationery is getting imported into India.
Diwali lights are coming from China.
And not only this, there are Indian bags with Indian brand names are being manufactured in China and brought here. So there are a whole host of issues. That's what I meant, that unless you make India. So one method is, how did financial markets develop? We created an institution of auditors so that people who invest on the stock market, they look at the auditor and auditor's certificate, and they have some confidence. Now, similarly, compliance, where every some official has to come and visit your site and certify something that you are compliant, that he is not updated on in terms of what is today state of the art. What we need to do is to do self-certification. We are talking a lot about it, but self-certification backed by a discipline of audit, which should be spread to not confined to only the financial area, but to other areas also. For example, if I want to build a factory, right? I know what is required for compliance. I give a certificate that we are compliant and back it up with a certificate from Ernst & Young, who puts his reputation on the line. So the petty official who is looking for a quick buck by delaying your business by 6 months or a year so that he gets a little bit of rent from you and holds up the development of the country is kept out of this. So we need to really think out of the box. And what e-business has been done by, Mr. Kant's office and his brainchild has to be spread into different areas and eliminate people giving you clearances step by step by step.
Okay. Mr. Kant, the question has come for you from the audience. You mentioned that Make in India is not about protectionism. So then why do we have motorbikes and cars that are 100% protected from imports?
You see, bikes are coming in. I mean, you can import a bike. Who stops you from importing a bike? I mean, this is an absurd question. Anybody can import a bike today into India. It's just that we are saying that if you want India to be a global player, you can't do this by protecting Indian entrepreneurs alone. I mean, look at what Mr. Kalyani has done. Today, he's supplying to all the top car manufacturers across the world. I mean, he supplies to BMW, he supplies to Mercedes-Benz. Look at a young boy called Udyant Malhotra who does datamatics technology. He supplies to Boeing, he supplies to Bellcopter, he supplies to every single automobile manufacturers. Look at what India has done. I mean, we've become the center for compact car manufacturing. Our auto component manufacturers are the best in the world today. Look at our pharmaceuticals, what they've done. They've gone and captured the world around. The Pfizers of the world can't take on Indian pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I'll just open up the floor to questions now. Any questions? Okay, the gentleman over there, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Rohit Verma. My question is to Mr. Kant. You know, we've been talking about SMEs being the powerhouse of job generation. I want to know how are we enabling the SMEs which have world-class product to go global. SMEs today are having different problems. First is, if they want to increase their manufacturing, they have to take a loan which has high interest rates in the country. Second, the excise and sale tax to grow within the country is very high. Third, employee rising cost and inflation every year contribute to high costs. So how can we tackle all these situations on ground? This is the micro issue. The macro is jobs are being created. There are a lot of jobs which are coming into the market. There's 14% manufacturing you said that we need to target. But unless we address this issue, how can we onto firstly developing a brand within India, then go global?
Very crucial question there, because very few Indian companies have succeeded in building Indian brands.
Let me tell you the key to all this, not merely for SMEs, but vast number of entrepreneurship, is just make India the easiest place to do business. And that is what the government is doing. Starting a business, starting construction, getting electricity, enforcement of contracts, just make India the easiest place. And that is what the government has been doing in the last 7 months. Just crap away all the rules, regulations, procedures, integrate, use technology. I think this is work in progress. A lot of work on this has been done. What has been done in the last 7 months has not been done in India in the last 30 years, let me tell you, on ease of doing business. And this is work in progress. We'll deliver this. And we'll make India one of the easiest places to do business. And we are determined to do this.
Mr. Shah over there.
And let me also tell you about entrepreneurship. Why? Flipkart, Snapdeal, they've taken on the Amazons of the world. These are all young Indian entrepreneurs.
Mr. Shah over there, and then we'll come to you, ma'am. Just 1 second.
Hello. No, it's a fantastic banner the Prime Minister has given, Make in India, and I can't disagree with anything Mr. Amitabh Kant has said. He's a man on a mission. But I only hope that it doesn't become like Tom Cruise in some Mission Impossible going right down to the wire, because imports on, as you said, there's very little protection except for certain items, but very little protection on most manufactured goods. They are coming in. It is growing. Manufacturing is not growing right now in India. And the proportion of mostly Chinese goods of all kinds, good quality goods, coming into India is going to grow. Our entire growth rate...
So what's your question?
So the question is that unless we really get going fast, we're going to be having lesser Make in India, continue with Make in China, and submit our growth rates into the hands of China.
Okay, that would be the last question. You can continue the conversation outside, but Mr. Kant, with that, I'd like you to give a closing comment also, because clearly, 7 months, there was a lot of optimism at the start of this campaign, but now it seems like there's a bit of disillusionment setting in, you know. Yes, results are slow, this is work in progress, but like we started, that the expectations are very high.
So I think one must understand that India is growing at about 6%. The rate is accelerating. India is the only oasis of growth in the midst of a barren economic landscape all over the world. And if Indians are pessimistic when India is growing at 6%, you've got to look at what's happening. I was at the Aero Show in Bangalore. I mean, it's just full of young Indian entrepreneurs doing just about everything to take on the world. So I don't think India needs to be pessimistic. India needs to be optimistic. We need to set our house in order. Ease of doing business, macro economy. You've captured inflation now. You will see that the macro economy will get set right. You get ease of doing business if you want to grow on consistent basis over a long period of time. Inverted duty structures have been set right in this budget and in the previous budget, and I am extremely optimistic that a young population, extremely young population, 950 million mobiles, growing at about 9 million a month, will bypass the traditional model of Europe and America. It'll just bypass the brick and mortar approach and get into digital technology and take on the rest of the world. It'll be a very different model of growth for India.
Okay, we hope that it's true, that we do have a very inspiring model of growth. Let me get Valerie in here. We have a young tech entrepreneur right here. Valerie, what next after Zip Dial, and how convinced are you with Mr. Kant's arguments that yes, doing business in India is going to get easy very quickly?
There's all the right assets here to build exciting businesses, and I think it's also really about not just for India, but from India. And to touch back on something that Mr. Deveshwar said earlier, the thing that I encourage a lot of young entrepreneurs about is thinking about brand, thinking about have the courage to price at a premium. It's not just about cost savings. Made in India should mean premium, should mean innovation, should mean IP. That's something that actually is the inspiring thing. Entrepreneurs don't take up the huge challenge of starting a business because they're going to undercut on cost to gain market share. They want to really change something.
Okay.
So that's the thing that we have to keep focused on.
You still didn't tell us what's the new next project after this done.
I'm actually genuinely very excited the thing that I like about Twitter and working for Twitter now is that they are really thinking about India in the right way. They're not writing product specs in San Francisco and handing it over to engineers to just be coded. It's really about end-to-end strategy, design, building, delivery. So that's very exciting. And check back with me in a year or two on my next project.
Okay. Mr. Kalyani, what investments do we expect from you in India?
Well, I think the big opportunities really lie in areas like defense, railways, as far as manufacturing for people like us is concerned. And I'm very optimistic. You know, I honestly believe that the country has a strong leadership, it's created a vision, it's created a structure. A lot of things have happened which you are not seeing in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of getting rid of some archaic laws and regulations. Environment clearances are now happening online. You know, 160 days you get your clearance, or at least you get a yes or no, whatever it is. And a lot more things need to happen.
So a lot more investment in defense.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to compliment him. He acts, he just doesn't talk. He's just announced the setting up of 4 new defense factories in India.
Okay. All right, Mr. Deveshwar.
I mentioned to you very early, you know, we're wanting to build Indian brands. You know, we always end up favoring the foreign brands because foreign brands sold in India pay a much lower tax than what Indian brands do. And we can discuss that away from this forum.
Mr. Kant, that's a contentious
No, he knows
point
it.
there.
He knows it. He's right. But it requires, you know, a lot of staying power. It requires innovation. It requires, you know, intellectual property. It requires R&D, and it requires perseverance. And we are in the process of building 20 factories. So how much money we want to spend? We are one company that is not looking for the interest rates to dip before we think of investment.
Okay.
We are not borrowing money. We want to invest, but we're finding these little roadblocks where, you know, we get stuck on land, we get stuck on permissions and so on and so forth. I wish we were given a self-certification basis and then you hang us if we deviated, but let us contribute to this country in a significant way.
Well, thank you very much. Overall, a lot of optimism amongst our panelists, and we do hope that the next decade is about the India story succeeding because of the government and not in spite the government. Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. Thank you very much, Mr. Deveshwar, Mr. Kalyani. Thanks, Valerie.
We would like to thank our session sponsor, ONGC, for this riveting session. And with that, I'd also like to invite on stage Dr. Bharat K. Singh, Chairman, Business Service Review Council, the Aditya Birla Management Corporation Limited, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to the esteemed panel. Once again, Make in India, Smart, Sell or Game Changer. This enthralling, engaging session was brought to us by our session sponsor, ONGC.